welcome along to this special event organised by your club. It gives us an opportunity to spend a little bit of time with its most decorated ambassador. I think I'll call you that to start with, Matt. Before I introduce a guy who shouldn't really need any introduction, for those of you who don't know who I am, I'm Andrew Simpson, and I am the former sports editor at the Northwich Guardian, and was lucky enough to write about most of Matt's career. But I was thinking this afternoon when I was preparing for this that Matt's rode for so long that I was still in education even when he started his senior career. So I wasn't lucky enough to follow all of it, but most of it. And thank you to Graham, club chairman, for inviting me to put the questions to Matt this evening. So obviously Matt Langridge, MBE, and still reigning Olympic champion. We chuckled about that last night. I mean, he really is milking it for all it's worth. But reigning champion for a little bit longer, and obviously, of course, reached the pinnacle of this wonderful sport a little over 4 years ago when he won a gold medal as part of the British men's 8 at the Olympic Games in Rio. But had quite the CV before then. It was his 4th Olympics, and he already had a silver and a bronze medal in his collection before that, coincidentally in the same boat class from Beijing and then London. He's also a 2-time world champion and also claimed a European title in 2015 for good measure. And as a junior, he also, of course, made history as the first British rower to claim a gold in a men's single scull at the World Junior Championship. Now, I could sit and carry on reading out all of his achievements, but I'm not going to do that. Of course, the journey started here at Northwich Rowing Club, and I'm going to try in the next hour or so to cover as much of that as possible. I'm just really excited as well just to catch up with Matt to find out what he's been doing since I last spoke to him. Little bit of housekeeping. Thank you to everybody who submitted a question beforehand. I am going to ask, or have weaved in at points in the next hour or so, I will ask all of the questions that have been submitted so far. Don't worry if you've not had a chance to send one in, because if, like me, you spent most of 2020 talking to people through a computer screen on Zoom, you'll be aware that there is a chat function on this piece of software. So if you did want to put any comments or questions as we go along, I have set aside a little bit of time at the end where I'll have a rummage around there and ask anything that maybe hasn't been covered or you would like me to put to Matt at the end. We did toy with whether to do that as we go along, but we're gonna do it at the end. So feel free to write a message in there. I will read it out for you. You don't have to come on the mic if you don't want to. So happy for you to do that, and we'll hopefully squeeze a few of those in at the end if there's something that you really want to ask that I don't get around to. So that's enough of my voice, and we'll get started. But I was thinking about the order to do this when I was planning it yesterday and today, and I think actually I'm going to start with the here and now and talk a little bit about what Matt's been up to most recently, and of course we'll spend most of the time talking about rowing. Obviously, for those who don't know, Matt completed the final stage of training in October 2020 to obtain a flight crew license, and is now a qualified commercial airline pilot. And on Christmas Day, Matt, you posted a picture on Instagram of quite a special gift that you'd had from Santa Claus, which is the hard copy of your pilot's license from the UK Civil Aviation Authority. And I think what I'll start by asking you is kind of, when you have something like that in your hands, does it really feel now that kind of another stage of your life has started, or do you think that'll happen when you kind of get that first job and you're kind of away and in that next stage of kind of your career? Tell us a little bit about how that felt to get that and kind of where that leaves you, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously first confession. Can you hear me okay first before I? Yeah. Okay. I mean, obviously, I guess confessions first. That is probably a good example of how bad I am at social media. But I didn't actually receive on Christmas Day. I did receive it a month or two before. But it just takes me that long to get around the posting it. But I mean, I think for me, obviously, at the moment, it doesn't feel like the next chapter yet, because I think for me that will happen once I get a job.
Sure.
Obviously, the aim of doing a commercial pilot's license as opposed to just a private pilot license is to obviously to get it to be able to fly as a job. So for me, it's that kind of it's a step, but it's not where I want to be yet. So I think once actually I take that first flight and receive that first paycheck, I think that will be the first point of going, okay, this is the new chapter. I mean, obviously for me, this period has been a lot longer, more drawn out than I would have liked it to be. The plan wasn't for it to take 4 years; it was more maybe 1, 2 at most. But for various reasons, some faults of my own, some not. Obviously, breaking my leg. Put me back a year, and then COVID hasn't helped. So it's taken a lot longer. But I think for me, that kind of next chapter of my life for me, I think will come when I kind of get the job and I start flying and I get the first paycheck and I can actually feel like I'm actually flying commercially rather than just having a license.
Okay.
At the moment, it is still a little bit that limbo period of until it happens. So.
Okay, for those that don't know, and we talked a little bit about this yesterday, this isn't something that's happened by accident. You had a passion for aviation for a big part of your life. Do you want to talk a little bit about
that? So I think it's something for me that was something I always wanted to do. I still remember my first ever time on a plane. It was actually just before Christmas. My grandparents, as a treat, they took us on. I don't know if they still do, but it was basically a flight out of Manchester Airport.
Yeah.
And all they did was we turned up, and I remember there was we'd never been on a plane at that point before. And we turned up, and they'd put like a Rudolph nose, a smackles on the plane. And then, we took off, we flew around, and then magically Santa Claus appeared. And obviously for us, we're above the clouds, so we were like looking out, and as kids, as far as we could see over Lapland, and it was supposed to be this great kind of way of meeting Santa Claus. But for me, the thing that I remember the most was actually going on the plane and seeing the pilots for the first time. That was the bit when I first thought, actually, wow, this is incredible. This is what I want to do. And I remember speaking to careers people when I was younger and saying this is what I wanted to do. But then for a long time, I dismissed it. I didn't think that I'd ever been in a position to do it. I didn't think financially I'd have been in a position to do it, because obviously there is a certain amount of financial commitment to the training.
Sure.
But I also didn't really feel like, I probably didn't feel academically I was good enough to do it. I think for me, growing up, there's no secret that I prioritize rowing over schoolwork and my academics. And at the time, that's kind of the route I took. But I think when I kind of finished my rowing career and I looked at what I was going to do next, and I looked at various different options, but there's always this burning desire to fly and to do aviation. And eventually I got to the point where I said, okay, look, I've been lucky enough to make one career out of something that was my passion. And I thought, okay, well, I'll try my luck and do the next thing. And the thought of just doing something I wasn't really passionate about for the next 25 years didn't appeal to me. But then I think also in my rowing, the one thing that rowing taught me was actually if it is something you really want to do and you are passionate about it and you commit yourself to it, then actually you can succeed in it. And definitely there's a certain part of flight training that really is the first 6 months is all theory based, so it's all classroom. And actually you going back as a mature student almost, and you suddenly apply yourself much more like I applied myself to my sport. And suddenly, rather than, that was the bit, certainly my training I was most worried about, because when I was a 16-year-old, I wouldn't been seen as that academic. But actually, when I applied myself properly and I was committed to it, suddenly I found actually I was. And not only did I pass it, I excelled in it. And for me, it was a real kind of achievement in itself, because that was a bit I was particularly worried about. But I think that's the thing that for me that rowing taught me, that actually if I put the same kind of discipline and determination into something else, I could do that equally as well as I had done the sport.
So in terms of the timeline, then obviously you had this passion or this interest, but it wasn't something that you were necessarily consciously thinking about when you're in the thick of a sports career, and the intensity, of course, that comes with the life as a full-time athlete. You're not necessarily going, well, I've got this waiting for me when the day comes for me to finish. It sounds like it's come afterwards that you've kind of reignited the kind of interest for
It was
that.
something that was always in the background, but I didn't.
Right.
I said for a long time I'd kind of dismissed. Obviously, rowing took the priority because it has a much shorter lifespan. It's certainly not something you can go back to as a second career. It's kind of, you either do it as a first career or you don't do it. But I think for a long time I did dismiss it because I said I'll be the first to admit I didn't apply myself at school the way I should have done. And I kind of look back now and I think, oh God, if I could only go back and tell myself, my 15-year-old self, I actually knuckle down and apply yourself as much as you did in rowing, then I would have done a lot better. And I think because of that, I didn't necessarily have the confidence and the belief in myself at that time that it is something I could do. So though it's something I wanted to do, I didn't really necessarily believe it's something I could do. So it's only when I finished my career, and obviously my career, though, had lots of success, I had also lots of downs as well. But I think the big difference is that I always had the belief that if I stuck with it, I would get there and I would achieve it in the end. So then that for me did give me the confidence, determination that with flying, actually, if I do apply myself and I do show that same determination and commitment, then I will be able to achieve and make a success out of it.
I mean, you've started to answer my next question, which was kind of how much you've been able to take from what you learned as being a professional athlete has helped you get through this next stage. You've touched on one or two things. Is there any other things that you were able to kind of transfer over that you'd learned from being part of the British rowing team that have helped you get through the training, which the training to be a pilot's pretty intense as well, pretty demanding as well. Not anybody can do it. So how much kind of good stead has it put you in that you've been able to kind of take bits that you've learned along the way?
I think for me, it's helped me massively, and it's something you don't realise when you're doing sport. And certainly for me as an athlete, I kind of finished rowing and I thought, okay, all I've done is be an athlete for this long, but you don't realise actually there's lots of skills that you've learned that you can transfer. I mean, I think for me, a big one was discipline. Certainly in that first 6 months, it was really intense. I mean, you were studying. I mean, you're in class all day from 8 till 4, but then you're getting back and you have an hour's rest, and then you're studying till pretty much you go to bed, and then weekends you're just studying all day. So there was that kind of routine, that discipline of it, and I think I definitely found other people on the cadets struggled with that. The fact that they had to sacrifice and maybe give up part of their social life to do that. But for me, based on what I'd done as an athlete, it wasn't such a problem for me. I got used to that mindset of having a goal and being disciplined and sacrificing the other things to make sure I achieved that goal. So I actually didn't find it too difficult. As far as I was concerned, it was almost like an easy step from being. In some ways, it was easier because it was hard, but it was only for 6 months. It wasn't 4 years.
Sure.
So in that sense, it was a much shorter period to commit to. But then I also think other things as well. I think certainly with rowing that being part of a team, I think really helps. I know that in my career, I've done all different boats. I've been the single, I've also been in the 8. And I think also that teamwork has really helped. Definitely when you're flying in the final part of my course. So the first part of my course was all about flying small planes. And in that part of the course, you are very much a single pilot. So you're in command of everything, the whole operation. But the final part of the course is when they teach you to work as a team and coordinate between you and your other co-pilot. And I think for me that came quite naturally because I'm so used to working in a team and understanding the dynamics of a team. And then the other things I think are kind of dealing with pressure. Obviously, with again the first part of the course was all you have 14 exams in 6 months, and so it's kind of it's making sure that you prepare yourself in the best way and then deliver on the day. And I actually did, in that sense, I really did go back to my rowing mentality. Good. So in the build up to an exam, I'd almost build up in the same way that I'd build up to a race. So, and then like a couple of days before, I'd do like a practice mock exam in the same way I would have done in like a training piece building up. And then I would go through the same routines of wearing the same thing I was going to wear on the day in like a practice a couple of days before. So I went very much back into that kind of same mentality that I would do in a build up a race. I made sure that the night before the exam I got a nice early night, and just the exact same routines that I kind of used to when I was an athlete. They kind of put me back in that comfort zone.
Yeah.
So when I kind of sat there in the examination hall, that rather than feeling nervous and anxious, I felt, okay, look, this is a place I'm comfortable and prepared. I've done everything that I need to do, and now I can just go out and deliver. And it's amazing how much I was able to go back into that mindset.
Definitely. I mean, it's something you read a lot, or people like me write a lot about, kind of the transition that people make when they've been in full-time sport to go into another sector if they don't stay on as coaches or administrators in their sport. And there's lots of debate around this about kind of what role the sport has in helping you to kind of make that next step. And obviously you've described there lots of the skills that you've learned have come in really handy. And you're someone who is kind of in the last stage of that transition, just before you hopefully get that job. So you kind of, the answer to this next question is probably is kind of ongoing. But was that something that was scary when you kind of had to sit down and think about where do I go from here? Can you, or maybe you've talked about this with some of your former teammates, kind of they've been going through the same thing about what life is like after rowing. I mean, is it scary? Are you kind of finding your way as you go along, I guess? I mean, like I say, you're on the cusp, hopefully, of making the final step now when you get into employment. But like I say, we read a lot about the transition that athletes make when their competitive career ends, and it for some is really, really challenging, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's almost been a case that it's been delayed, because obviously, certainly, although it's taken me a lot longer to get to this point that I would have wanted to, because I had this new ambition that I was going into, this kind of new passion that I had, then it kind of it gave me that other thing to get excited about.
Okay.
So I think obviously I know for a lot of athletes, for a lot of my teammates, they do really struggle that for so long they have this real dream, this ambition of doing the Olympics or whatever it is in their sport. And they struggle to find that same kind of passion for something else, and they find themselves in kind of a job that they don't necessarily enjoy, that they're just mundane and doesn't give them the same buzz that rowing or whatever sport it is gave them. But I think for me, because flying was so exciting, and arguably that was part of the reason I retired when I did. It wasn't, I mean, physically, I probably could have done other games.
Okay.
I did feel that probably I was at the end of what I wanted to do, but I definitely feel physically I could have carried on. But because I had this new career that I wanted to go to, that I was really genuinely excited about, it kind of made it a good time to stop. And I think even though I've had lots of ups and downs along the way, the fact that I've always been working towards something, which again is something that as athletes we're quite comfortable with. I mean, when you're in an Olympic cycle, even though it might be 4 years away, you're always building to the Olympics. So with the flight training, it was always building to get my license. And then, I've now suddenly hit a hurdle I wasn't expecting. I kind of was expecting to get my license and then go straight into hopefully a job situation. And for obviously the current pandemic, it's not worked out in that way. And I guess, so in some ways it's probably delayed it. Obviously I'd hope that it won't be too long till it bounces back a little bit and I can get a job. But I think for me, the fact that I had this kind of exciting career that I was looking forward to, for me, it definitely helped. Whereas I know a lot of my colleagues have really struggled, because you do. I guess part of the problem is that you go from being the very best at something to almost being right at the bottom of the pile, and it's a big shock. I mean, I'm speaking to I remember speaking to a couple of guys I rode with, and they said that they went in and they didn't even know how to use a photocopy on their first day, and obviously they're a lot older than the normal graduate, so people expect them to know all this stuff, and suddenly they just feel like they're kind of right down at the bottom because they don't know how to do the basics. And I guess part of the problem is a lot of companies aren't set up to even though that there are a lot of transferable skills, they're not set up necessarily to use them and train them in the right necessary way.
Okay.
So I think it's quite difficult, and I think it's been made more difficult by the fact that as sports go more professional, you obviously are taking more time away from a career than you would have. If we'd gone back 20 years to when Steve Eggrave was on, a lot of it was part-time, so people were doing a career alongside, and then it was a much easier transition to then just continue that career when you finished. And also you wouldn't maybe go to as many games, so your athletic career would be shorter.
But
I think it's definitely but I think so for me, the fact that I found something that I'm genuinely excited about has definitely helped.
Definitely. Last thing on this section, and then we will move on to talk about your career. And it's something you mentioned to me yesterday about, obviously the whole world at the moment is in a kind of an uncertain period. You yourself are going into trying to get into a sector that's that's stalled at the moment. Though of course we're hoping it in 2021 that changes. And you've talked about this elsewhere and written about this in some of the blogs that you've done as well, about how again resilience is a big kind of word at the forefront of your mind at the moment. Something as well that you had to learn as an athlete to deal with downs, or for example, when you're injured or things didn't go your way, and you are dealing with uncertainty like the rest of us at the moment, but you're able to kind of call on those reserves of resilience. So it's interesting again, kind of right here, right now, as we sit here tonight, how those experiences are teaching you maybe hopefully how to handle this better than some other people. I'm not saying you're not having your kind of frustrations as well, but that resilience, you mentioned this to me yesterday, I thought that'd be a nice way to close this section of kind of helping you get through this time, which we're all kind of figuring out how to muddle through.
Yeah, I think, arguably, I'd probably say my resilience has probably been tested more than it has been.
I can imagine.
Certainly this because it's completely out of my control. I think in the past, obviously, I had ups and downs, but generally it was within my control to either kind of call it a day or carry on and go again. And I think for me, resilience it's not about not having the bad days and the doubts, because I think that's completely natural and normal. It's about appreciating that it is natural and normal, picking yourself up and go again. And I think sometimes people think, oh, they've got to have a brave face on it all the time. And that's just, as you all have kind of bad days when it's not going your way, and doubts where you think, okay, maybe it's not going to go my way. But actually, it's about accepting that that's normal, accepting that it's a normal human response, and then having the ability to go, okay, right, I need to pick myself up and we're going to go again. And it might happen again, and then you do it again. And I think and it's having that belief. I think for me, it's just that belief that it will, if you persevere, it'll eventually, you'll get to where you want to be. And I think, like I said before, I think that's the thing that taught me in my sporting career, and the fact that for me, okay, arguably it took me four Olympic Games to get a gold medal. So I do know that sometimes you have to persevere with it, and eventually you'll get there. And I think definitely, I said it's being tested more now because it is completely out of my control, as everybody's control.
Definitely.
But I think that, I think it's knowing that ultimately, you just kind of got to kind of persevere with it, and it will get better, and we'll get where we want to be.
Now, you mentioned there about winning the gold medal. So let's segue. Let's move into sport. The first thing I wanted to kind of ask you in this section is, because lots of us will never know what this feels like, but how does becoming an Olympic champion change your life?
Go
on.
I think for me, it's not. I wouldn't say it's necessarily changed my life. It's not. Certainly in a sport like rowing, it's not like you win a gold medal and suddenly all your troubles disappear overnight. It's not like suddenly there's £1 million checks coming to the door or anything like that. It's, for me, the way it's changed my life is more that confirmation or assurance that all the time and effort I put into something was worthwhile, and I stuck with it and achieved it. I don't think it's necessarily changed on a day-to-day basis, but definitely the way I feel about myself, and the kind of I think it's the reward for all the hard work that I put in, and it's for me it's kind of that acknowledgement that said that resilience has paid off. And actually I did persevere with something, and I was able to achieve it, I think, yes, that confidence, it's given me that confidence that actually, okay, I can do the same. And that's why I know that even though at the moment there's no planes in the sky and I've just gone into a sector that's been hit particularly badly, I do know that ultimately I will get there, and by sticking with it, I will kind of I will be in a cockpit at some point, and it might take a bit longer, but I think that's for me what kind of really changed. And it's also, I don't know, it's also a bit of a weight off my shoulders that you have this dream and you want to get, and you keep telling you I can make it, and then to finally actually make it, then you can kind of, it's almost you can finally relax in yourself and you don't have to chase it anymore.
What about a kind of a part B to that question? You know, you'll be asked to do things as a result of it, or how about how other people relate to you, whether it's friends or even strangers? Does that change?
Yeah, I think I mean, you definitely, in terms of the experiences that come from the gold medal, it is a notch up from the silver and the bronze. I mean, after Rio, you definitely get invited to a lot more stuff, which I've noticed. You get to go to the palace, and
of course,
you get a nice MBE. I mean, I mean, I was very honoured. You do sometimes feel when you're in a room and you've got a lot of servicemen and other people who've spent their life dedicated to stuff, whether you really deserve it. Because ultimately, I just did a sport I loved.
Sure.
But I'm very honoured to have it, and I think that you do get some really nice things that come off the back of it. But like everything, it's always short lived. You've got to enjoy it while you can, and then you've kind of you've got to find your next thing to move on. You can't. I mean, for me, I know that some people have made a career out of it. I mean, I know ex-rowers are still doing motivational talks and stuff off the back of it.
Okay.
But for me, it was very much about finding my next challenge, my next thing that's going to excite me. I didn't want to still be kind of living off the back of something I did 20 years ago. I kind of wanted to find my next thing that I could be good at and next thing I could do well at.
Okay. Let me transport you back in time to Rio. What do you remember now about the race? The final?
I mean, I know the race like the back of my hand because I've watched it so many times.
That's going to be my next question. Do you watch it back? So yes, you do.
I mean, I don't watch it when I'm still home on my own, and it's because with talks and stuff I do, then you do end up watching it back. It's a much easier one to watch than the silver and the bronze was. So
I bet.
I don't mind it so much. But it's still, to be honest, it's still a blur.
Really?
It still feels pretty surreal. I mean, for me, it was 16 years of kind of building up to it. It's something I dreamt about for a long time. I dreamt about how I'd feel and what I would do and my reaction would be. And then suddenly it's done, it's over. And you kind of, you almost want to go back and relive it again.
Yes.
I mean, you think it's, I mean, 5.5 minutes doesn't feel very long when you've been building up to it for so long. So yeah, it's kind of like, oh god, it's done. I've achieved it, and it's I don't know. It's a whole mix. It's kind of first emotion, I think, is probably relief that we'd finally done it. The second one is kind of disbelief that we've done it, and then it's this whole kind of mix of joy and ups and downs, and it's weird because for so long you're building up to it. You just want to win it and be done, but then once it's done, you just want to go back and do it all again.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And I mean, I can see why Steve went for so many goals, because it's quite addictive, and I definitely was tempted to. I mean, I was pretty certain before Rio that I was going to call it a day, but then after Rio, I definitely thought, okay, I quite enjoy this. So
I'd like to do that again. Yeah. I mean, I've reread some of the interviews that we did in the aftermath of it today, and wrote down a line here that you'd said to me, you just had that feeling from the moment you started that race that you were going to win. And that's sometimes something that athletes say. It's hard feeling to describe. It's certainly not arrogance. Just you guys had hit that sweet spot, and no matter what the other crews did that day, you were going to beat them. Can you kind of describe what that's like? Because it won't happen a lot in your career to know, like, yeah, today is going to be our day. And of course, you'd raced in other Olympic finals, and you might have felt differently at the start line for those. But what did you mean when you said to me, I just knew from the first stroke that we were going to do it?
I think it was I mean, I think for Rio that, I guess going into Rio, it was a definite different. I mean, sitting on the start line in Rio, different to. So if I go back to Beijing, in Beijing we'd gone really well. We'd had a really good training camp. We'd been going really well. We'd won the semi-final, which has taken us direct to the final. Our time against the Canadians, who also won the other side, was quicker.
Yeah.
So we went into the final really thinking that if we rode well, we could win it, but we didn't know. And that's the big difference. Like in Rio, like we really, like in Beijing, we really felt we could do it. We believed we could do it, but we didn't know we could do it. But the difference in Rio was there was just a confidence within the boat.
Sure.
I think maybe it came down to the fact that we'd had more guys do it before. So obviously in Beijing, at that point, I mean, I'd won the World Championships as a junior, but I'd never won a senior race, and I don't think any of the guys in the boat had either. So even though we'd been going really well, we hadn't got to that top step yet. So we really believed we could, but we didn't know. Whereas I think in Rio, we definitely did. I mean, obviously, I'd been world champion. We had 2 guys in the boat who were 2 times Olympic champion. We had multiple world champions within the boat, and we'd had an equally good training camp in the build-up. And it was very much a case of we knew that as long as we performed the way we were capable of performing, we would win. There was nothing any of the other crews could do to stop us. It was all about us performing the way we were capable of doing. And I guess, yeah, I mean, so the only doubt going into it in my mind was whether we were going to row the way we could row. And I think, yeah, within 10 strokes, I knew that it was a case of, yeah, okay, we've all turned up, we've clicked in, we'd already I mean, I think we'd taken the smallest margin, but again, when you're so tuned in racing, it feels already like it's a massive margin. But you know your boat's moving faster, you know you're doing what we were able to do. And yeah, within 10 strokes, I kind of knew that we'd clicked in and today was going to be our day. And I knew once we got in front, there was no way that we were going to let slip. So yeah, I mean, it really was for me. I mean, I know a lot of people say it, but it genuinely was for me. It's within 10 strokes, I kind of knew we were going to win it.
Now, one of the submitted questions that we've had, and it's absolutely relevant to what you've just described, but you can broaden it out as well if you like. I mean, someone's asked what goes through your mind when you're literally sat there waiting for the start of a race like that. I don't know if it was different for you each time, or whether you had I think that question also was angling at whether you had a little ritual or kind of something that you did or kind of went through in your final few seconds of prep. But I thought I'd slip that one in there because I knew I was going to ask you about the biggest race of all. But what was that like for you? Was it different each time, or did you find something that worked for you as a routine?
No, I definitely did. I mean, I think one of the things that you definitely do and the more you do it, as an athlete, you do is you get your own little routine. And I mean, certainly in a big pressure environment that, like the Olympics, it all comes down to that routine helps take away a bit of pressure. It kind of gives you comfort in the familiarity of doing your set routine.
Yeah.
But it's also, I think for me, it's also about, I mean, our whole build up to a game is about steps. So obviously you start off with a 4-year cycle, and 4 years is a long time. You can't spend 4 years training, just constantly think about the Olympics. You have to break it down. You break it down to the next steps. Okay, we have World Championships every 3 years, and then so that's already broken it down to just 1 year, and then you may have some trials coming up, so you break it down to the next month, or it might be an ergo test, so it's constantly breaking down step by step. And for me, that goes all the way. So what I've kind of learned to do is actually, when I'm sitting on the start line, I only think about the first 10 strokes. I only think about the first stroke.
Right.
Because as far as I'm concerned, I need to get that first stroke right, and then we're on to the second stroke. If I start thinking about what's going to happen halfway down the course, but I don't get the first part right, well, actually, it doesn't matter. So it's very much about kind of keeping my focus on just the next step. Yeah, okay, the halfway point is in the background, but my focus is on the next step.
Okay.
And actually, then in terms of the ritual, it's interesting because it's not something I actually realised I did. It's only actually I've done some talks for Virgin Atlantic, and I was part of so they do a first officer to command course, which is training guys who are first officers who are about to go for their captaincy exams, and obviously it's going through again. And I was part of a team, so I was just talking about dealing the pressure.
Okay.
I was listening to one of the other guys talking, and they talked about the startle effect. And what they talk about as pilots, because the startle effect is that kind of moment, like rabbit in a headlights moment of, do you kind of is it fight or flight, where you just almost freeze? And they talk about what they do. And so one of the things as pilots, what they do, say if something goes wrong, but they're in the simulator, obviously, not anything ever goes wrong, don't worry, anyone. But if they get that startle effect, the first thing they're taught to do is do something to break it. So it's just so they say maybe like just you move your seat back a bit, or you sit on your hands, or just something to kind of break that moment of. And then they talked on about athletes, and they gave some examples of athletes. And this is when suddenly I realised, oh, hold on, I've been doing this for years. And I guess my startle effect was I'd sit there and I would look across at my opposition man and smile, and I look across my other opposition man and smile, and I just simply like nod to myself, as in it's kind of like. It's my acknowledgement of, okay, that these guys next to me are also human. They are the same as me. They're going through the same motions as me. And then it's that kind of, I'd smile to myself just to kind of reassure myself, actually, you know what, this is where I want to be, and this is what I've chosen to do. And that's just my way of breaking that moment of tension. Okay. And then it's almost like I do that, and then it's like, okay, I'm ready, let's go. But I didn't even realize I did it until only later, and I thought, okay, that's, yeah, I remember I did that pretty much for any or any race.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just that. So I think that's for the main things for me. It's kind of taking each step by step, but then also having your own routine. I mean, my routine I could give you from it starts the night before all the way up to the final, but it's what works for me and it might work for different people.
I mean, obviously, of a career that spanned the length that yours did you find that kind of the kind of mental side, the approach in your mind to racing, did that change a lot over the course of your time in the senior team from the early 2000s right through? We read and we hear and we find out a lot now if we look for it about the importance that's placed on kind of mental preparation, certainly at elite and professional level. Did you notice that there was a big change in that over the course of your time in the British rowing team, or was it always there?
Do you mean my own personal one, or
no? Just how the team approaches it. So everyone will have. You've talked today about kind of your individual routine, but you know we hear now about athletes talking to sports psychologists and trying to get every like little bit of edge that they can. Was that something that was kind of part of the culture when you first started as a senior in the British rowing team, or have you noticed that that's become more prominent as your career unfolded?
I mean, I think in the men's team, no.
Okay.
Because I mean, ultimately, Jürgen didn't change in my whole period. And for anybody who knows Jürgen he's very set in his ways, old. So although the team had psychologists, we weren't really encouraged to use them. But I think what Jürgen would probably, I mean, if you look at Jürgen and you break down the way he trains, that he would argue that what he does and the way he trains us is building the mentality. Right. So the psychology himself, kind of if you look at the way the trial system is set up, I mean, he would arguably, he's quite happy to put us into really stressful situations in the trial period, because as far as he's concerned, he's like, well, if I kind of put you in a most uncomfortable place here, then actually when we get to the Olympics, it'll almost be easier. And arguably, I would agree that it actually was. I mean, for me, arguably, by the time I got to the Olympics, pressure-wise, it was almost easy to deal with, because you were just able to concentrate on yourself. You knew you were going to race. There wasn't this kind of uncertainty that you'd have in the trial period.
Okay.
I mean, I think for me, what really did noticeably change within the team, though, is the mentality of the team and the belief. When I started in Athens, we had kind of Matthew Pinsent and James Cracknell they were the two superstars. They were almost the guys seen as they're the ones going for the gold medal, and the rest of us are kind of scraping around. If we can make the A final, that's good.
Yeah.
But then what happened is and it was almost a case of we put them on a pedestal, and they were almost seen as superhuman, and nobody could match them. And then what slowly happened towards the end of the Athens era was actually one or two of the guys started to match them on some training pieces. And then it was amazing how suddenly one or two of them matched them. And then it's like, hold on a minute. I didn't think I was as good as them, but I know I'm as good as them. So actually, if they can do it, I can do it. And then suddenly the whole team started to come up. And I think that's what happened. So in 2005, when Matthew and James retired, and then we had the 4 win. And again, it was guys that we'd all been training with that up till that point we all saw as our equals, that we kind of, hold a minute, they're winning the gold medals. I believe I'm as good as them. So, and then by the end of my career, the mentality in the team was like, well, I'm part of the British team. I mean, if like, it's almost an expectance that you should be able to go out there and fight for the medals and fight for the wins, because there's the mentality of the team. It just becomes so strong.
Yeah.
So yeah,
kind of a natural evolution by the sound of it. Yeah, that makes complete sense. I mean, one of the other things I got written down here, but you've brought it up there, so I'll ask you now. It's a bit of an unfair question. I was going to say, how important is winning? And there is a reason I asked you that. In that, I remember again speaking to you both after Beijing and after London, and to mere mortals, to be the owner of 2 Olympic medals, to somebody like me, would seem, an extraordinary achievement. But what always used to come through was that you were there to do one thing, and that was to finish first. And I don't know ultimately if that's what swayed you after London to come back, to kind of fill that gap. But when you're operating at that level, like you say, and working for somebody like Jürgen, how important is winning? Which seems a ridiculous question, but it seems to kind of infuse through everything that you guys do. It's about getting to be first, isn't it?
Yeah, I think yeah, it definitely is. I think and it's hard to explain, because I mean, I know, having spoke to people after London and Beijing, and you're disappointed. I was disappointed.
Yeah, you were. Yeah.
No point denying it. I mean, I was really disappointed. I wasn't even slightly disappointed. I mean, for me, I'd gone there. I was there for one medal, and that was the gold medal. And we didn't get it. And that's not to say that I don't think that getting silver and bronze is an achievement. It's just the fact that we were very much focused on the gold. So as far as we're concerned, we'd missed our mark. But I think in order to get the gold, you have to have that mentality. You're there to go for it.
Sure.
But I think, the one thing about the team is that, okay, in some ways that it's a good thing, because I think the mentality of we're there to get gold medals definitely is why we are successful. But it also does mean that for the guys that don't, you almost feel like you've failed a little bit, because you are part of this team that's so successful. So it does have its kind of ups and downsides to it as well. But I think the mentality that a lot of I guess there is, once you've got to the top step once, your mentality definitely changes, because it definitely changes. There is a difference between thinking you can do it and knowing you can do it. And I guess it comes down to, okay, if you put it at a real basic level, if you're racing somebody you can beat, and they're in front of you, then your mentality is like, oh, hold on a minute, what's going on? I know I should be better than this, but so you just don't let it happen. You do everything you can to get back in front of them.
Yeah.
Whereas, I'm not saying this is always the case, but yeah, if there's somebody who you think you can beat, but you don't know you can, and they're in front of you, you think, oh, well, okay, well, I thought I could beat him, but maybe I can't. And those doubts creep in. And I think that's the difference, is once, it's definitely a different mentality of kind of knowing you can, that you can win. And I think that's definitely, I mean, so I think that one of the biggest things that Jürgen did was really well in the London to Rio, was he put all the guys in the 8 in 2013. Yeah. So we had 8 guys with a gold medal, and then straight away it's a big impact on the team, because you've got a lot of guys who've got that new mentality.
Definitely. I'm going to put in one of the submitted questions here from Freddie, who wants to know, because we've just been talking about winning, I think it's relevant. What would you say are the main attributes that contributed to being as successful as you were? I presume he means as kind of characteristics or kind of traits. What would be the ones that you would say were the most important to help you to get to where you ultimately ended up?
I mean, I think it's obviously been very determined. I'm very competitive. I think that's for me one of the things that me personally, I'm not saying that everybody has to be like this, but if
Sure.
I mean, I think for me that was the big thing that I enjoyed most about the sport. I enjoyed the competition. I didn't massively enjoy the training, but I enjoyed the competition and training. So, like, if there was I don't know if we're doing pieces or there was anything that was competitive, then I enjoyed it. But if it was just the mundane of going out and paddling, I did it because I needed to, but
Yeah.
I wasn't. It didn't kind of thrill me. But I think ultimately the biggest driver for me was actually okay. Yes, it was to get the gold medal, but actually my biggest motivation and biggest driver was always just to be the best I could possibly be.
Okay.
And actually, I think that's the thing that really kind of kept me going. It's about fulfilling the potential and getting myself to as good as I could possibly be. And I think that was the big thing, that after Beijing and Rio, after Beijing and London, I still didn't feel that I'd fulfilled my potential. I still felt that there was definitely places I could improve.
Okay.
I mean, maybe if at Beijing I felt I'd done everything I possibly could do, and that was the best and that I could possibly be, I might have decided to retire then. But I think for me, there was always that. Well, there's still things I can do better. I could still be quicker. I could still. I mean, a lot of it is also changing my mentality, how I could maybe train better and get more training and more enjoyment out of rowing. It wasn't always a physical thing. It was how can I approach this to. I think that ultimately has been my biggest drive, is that it's always trying to look at critically at how I can be better. And I think if I'd ever got to a point where I said, right, okay, I can no longer be better, I've kind of ticked all the boxes, that would have been the point when maybe I'd retired. I mean, even at Rio, even my final year, I was still learning of how I could do things better or differently. And yeah, even when we won, I still think there's things I could have done better.
Kind of I would add a kind of part B to that question. How much of that comes from within you, as you are naturally kind of as part of your characteristics, and how much of that, you touched a little bit tonight on kind of the culture within the team, how much of that was learned, as in kind of that you were kind of taking on board from what was going on around you? It's probably a combination of both, but I'd be interested to know kind of the balance between the two.
I mean, it's a difficult one. There's probably a few people there who could tell you. I mean, I know there's one sitting there who could probably much better.
He's laughing now.
Yeah, I don't know, Paul. Do you want to pipe in, and you can say what I was like as a junior? I don't know. I think, yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, there is. I mean, as there always is with experience, you kind of learn lots of things in experience. And I think if I go back to, there's so many things. If I could go back in time and tell my younger self that I could do differently, but I think that kind of drive to constantly be better, I think maybe has always been there.
Okay.
I mean, I'd probably put a caveat to that. That obviously it was. I probably wouldn't say I did that in everything. Obviously, rowing was something I particularly enjoyed and was kind of very passionate about and enjoyed doing, and I definitely was more motivated to do that in rowing more than anything else.
Okay.
I said, unfortunately, I didn't. But equally, I do think that most things that I think for me, largely, if it's something I'm interested in, then it's always been there. I'm not maybe so great at doing it in something that I'm not interested or passionate in, but I don't know whether that's noble or not. But then you do. Yeah, I think with experience you do kind of learn. But I think also being part of the team, whether you have that kind of drive, whether you wouldn't be there if you didn't have that, or whether the team helps to build that, I'm not sure. I can't really.
Okay. Last question on this on this section, and you did kind of just touch on it there. You know, if I'd said to you before you went to Athens in 04, a 21-year-old Matt Langridge, if I'd said to you then that would be the first of 4 trips to an Olympic Games, what do you think he would have said to me?
I don't know. He probably wouldn't have believed 4. Maybe 1 more, but
Maybe 1 more, yeah.
I should believe 4. I mean, I think to be honest, in some ways, it's probably I wouldn't say lucky because obviously I had to work pretty hard for it, but
Sure.
I said I learned a lot through my career, so it's definitely good I didn't just do one, because one of the things I learned from Athens was that I needed to sometimes separate the result from the rest of the experience.
Okay.
I mean, I know with Athens, I went to Athens 21, I was quite naive, and I kind of had this vision of going there and being successful straight away. But I did definitely believe that in order to do that, everything needed to go perfectly.
Sure.
We needed to have this kind of ideal build-up. And unfortunately, that just wasn't the case. We kind of got to Athens, and because we had this idea that we needed to kind of have this great run up, we didn't perform as well as we probably could have done.
Right.
And then because of that, I felt like the fact the result hadn't gone as well as I wanted it to. Definitely, I let the result affect me, and I didn't really enjoy the experience of Athens. I mean, if you ask me which is my least favorite games, Athens would definitely be the one. And I mean, if somebody said, okay, you can fly home straight after the final, I probably would have done, because I was that kind of disappointed, and I let the result kind of consume me in terms of that. And then I think I was only after Athens when I was kind of chatting to some of the other guys in the team, and they were telling about kind of this amazing experience I'd had, and I suddenly realised that I'd missed out on that because I'd let the result kind of take over the whole experience. And I definitely kind of made a pact to myself that if ever I was to go to another games, that I would, even if the result didn't go my way, I would kind of park the result, I'd park the disappointment, and enjoy the experience. Because sometimes, I mean, I was lucky enough to go to another 3, so I was okay. But if Athens had been my only one, I would have missed out on this amazing experience because I was so fixated on the results and I couldn't separate the two. And I think that definitely the fact I was able to kind of go on allowed me to kind of learn and enjoy it. But it would have been a shame that if Athens had been my only one and I'd missed out on that, because to go to the Olympic Games I mean, it's still a great achievement, and it's still something that 99.999% of the population never experienced. So, I think I had to learn to separate the result from the experience.
Okay, I'm gonna move on now. I'm gonna do change the pace slightly. We're gonna do a little bit of a quick fire section. This is going to encompass quite a lot of the questions that have been submitted. So you can give short answers if you like, and we can whiz through them before I move on to the final section of the interview. So I'm gonna wade right in, and Freddie wants to know: did you compete in other sports before you went full time into rowing?
So my main sport was swimming, but I basically competed in any sport I could possibly do. Football, rugby, athletics, tennis. I think basically any sport I could possibly do. I was just mad keen on sport and would try every one. I mean, I think I was good at swimming, wasn't good at football. Rowing was definitely my best one though.
There is a football-related question. I think you've seen this one, but looking at your keepy uppy skills in the club's toilet roll challenge in 2020, did you ever consider football?
No, I think that's the beauty of modern technology, is you can do more than one take. So
I mean, later on, obviously, you had a really successful spell. You had a dabble in cycling and found that you were really good at that as well, didn't you?
Yeah, no, I mean, I was probably living off the back of being a full-time athlete for years, so I was able to convert my endurance base into cycling. But I think ultimately, if I was to take it any further, I think my size would have probably started going against me. It was quite nice to surprise a few people, because naturally, being pretty big, no one expected you to be so quick. But yeah, I think I was probably at the limit of. I think when you then try and do it a little bit of a higher level, then my size would have gone against me.
Did you have any sporting heroes when you were a youngster, or if not in sport, who were your main influences when you were in your formative years?
I mean, I hate to say it because obviously I know them now, but I guess my sporting heroes growing up were Steve and Matt, certainly in rowing. They were the reason I got into rowing. It was watching them in the 1996 Atlanta Games when Britain were doing particularly badly, and the one chance of a gold medal was from these two rowers. So it kind of made me watch it, and I watched it. And then afterwards, the commentary was all about tall people being good rowers, and so okay, I'd go down and give it a go. And then I found that Northwich Rowing Club was 5 minutes away from my house, and I'd probably walk past it a lot of times and not really paid any attention. And then suddenly, having seen it on TV, I thought, okay, well, I go and give it a go. So I think that for me, that they definitely, kind of certainly in a rowing sense, my idols.
Okay.
I think on a personal level, then obviously my family and my granddad was a big influence on me. He was a very kind of determined man. I think I get my competitive side from both parents. So yeah, I think obviously people around me kind of had influence on me. And
how did you find juggling your commitments to rowing training with studying when you were still in education, so doing your homework and getting ready for exams? And you're already smiling at that question.
I think unfortunately I've alluded to it not very well. So that's not a I mean, obviously that I'm not a good example of that. So I wouldn't for any people who are currently doing that, I'd advise you don't follow my path. I definitely could have done it better, and I've learned now I could apply myself a lot better to it. But unfortunately, at the time, I was, rowing was kind of my interest, and I didn't do a very good job of it.
Okay, I'm sorry there wasn't a name attached to this question, but what type of training session did you least look forward to?
So for me, it was always the long stuff. I mean, I said I used to love the racing, but the thing that I particularly hated was when we used to go on training camp, we used to go to a place called Sierra Nevada. It's up in the mountains, high altitude. High altitude affects people very differently. I think unfortunately I'm one of the people who doesn't enjoy it as much as others. But I think that combines. We used to first thing in the morning, 7 o'clock in the morning, we used to have to do 20 kilometers on the row machines. And you'd be half asleep. It would be. It sounds like an easy, mundane session, but for me, it was just misery. It was awful. I used to have to get up. By the end of my career, to get through it, I used to have to get up like an hour and a half early. I used to have to go for a run. I'd have to have a coffee. I'd have to stretch everything. It was just it was ridiculous. I mean, most people think it'd be like the 2Ks or the ergo tests, but actually for me, I enjoyed them. I didn't mind them. It was the mundane, long, steady stay that I just hated. So,
I mean, I was going to add my own part B to that. On it, have you got any tips for people who are listening on how to push through if you're really, really not in the mood for a session that's scheduled that day? What did you used to? How do you used to kind of get through that?
I think for me, it was just finding my own little competitions in my head. So it'd be like, okay, if I was on the rowing machine, it'd be like, right, okay, if I can just, I don't know, it would be like a competition to try and get a certain split, or I don't know. It was just a constant, like, find whatever I could to kind of keep myself amused.
Okay. One from me. Do you still have a sneaky go on an ergo from time to time to see if you still got it?
So this shows how bad the first lockdown was. I swore I'd never get on an ergo again, but that's how bad the first lockdown was. I actually started doing some ergo training, and I did actually do a few 2Ks to see how low I could get. I thought I was doing all right until I realised that I was slower than I was as a 16-year-old. So at that point, I thought, okay, I better.
Very sobering, yet.
Yeah, that was a shocking moment when I realised, I did an ergo test. Okay, that's not bad for my second go, but then I realised what I said I used to do as a 16-year-old. But okay, that's not actually great.
Amelia wants to know what was your favourite boat to race in?
So this is a difficult one because I would say it's definitely it's changed, and I'd probably say so. If you'd asked me 10 years ago or 5 years ago, I'd definitely said the single.
Okay.
But then actually, so I used to love the single because I used to love the fact that it was all you. If when you crossed the line, you knew it's all down to you. And I didn't really like the 8 because I guess I didn't like the fact it wasn't all me. But then actually, I kind of realised in the single that okay, it's great, but when you cross the line, you're out there on your own. You're kind of celebrating on your own, and there's no one around you. Whereas actually, when you cross the line in 8, and you've kind of got all your mates with you, and you've achieved it together, that equally is a great feeling as well. So I'd definitely say it's kind of changed. I mean, I couldn't say I'd say that. Yeah, I'd say the single, the 8, the pair. The one boat I'd say I don't like is the quad. I don't know why. Maybe it's just because I've never been a good one, or what I've considered to be a good one. But it's just about I've never managed to kind of make go well and enjoy. But yeah, I think each boat has its own kind of like attributes that you can enjoy.
Okay. A couple more to finish this section. What was it like meeting the Queen?
I mean, it's great. It's quite a it's very formal. She's obviously not very tall, but she's equal. I mean, it's incredible. You kind of, so I've met her quite a few times because of various Olympics. She has this amazing ability to at least give you the impression that she knows who you are. Considering her age, it's amazing. Like she genuinely. I mean, the first time I met her, you kind of get ushered. You're in a big room and you get all put in little groups, and then she comes around and speaks to each group.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, she gave me a genuine impression that she'd actually seen us race. I mean, whether she'd been briefed quickly beforehand or not, I mean, I couldn't believe that she'd watched our race. But yeah, she's very good at kind of at least giving you the impression that she knows who you are. But I can't believe she does with the amount of people that are there. But
you mentioned about watching races, and one I scribbled down to ask you: what are you like as a spectator? Do you like watching rowing? I asked this to lots of sports people, and it's really interesting how a lot of the professionals say that they really hate watching their own sport. So I scribbled that down to ask you. I mean, for example, have you watched any of the World Cups or World Championships since Rio, for example? Have you kind of, it's been on the TV, have you sat and watched it, or have you kind of found that you've not got that interest to watch it as a spectator?
No, I have watched
Okay.
them. I do watch them. I think yeah, I mean, I don't think I'm necessarily the best. I mean, I think it's the same with all sports, to be honest, that whenever I watch any sport, I'm always kind of, I like watching it, but equally, I always have that feeling, oh, I'd like to be doing it. Okay. So whether that's football, rugby, rowing, or whatever sport it is, I always still have that feeling, oh, I'd love to be the person doing it rather than watching it. And I think, but I think rowing, I can, like the World Cups, I can watch and just enjoy and not be too disappointed. The one I did struggle with was Henley.
Right. Okay.
When I was at Henley, I definitely did feel like, oh god, I wish I was out there racing.
Yeah.
Rather than sat on the bank watching. But I do kind of watch it and follow along. I mean, I feel it's amazing, even though it's only 4 years ago, how disconnected I feel to the current team, and I think there was a big change. So there aren't many of the guys I rode with who are still racing.
Very few. Yeah.
They are all very new, but I can kind of watch as a happy spectator. I don't know how I feel come Tokyo, but
yeah, that'll be strange, I'm sure. Last one in this section is from me, and it's a bit tongue in cheek, really. How many branches of Aldi do you think you've opened now?
Oh God!
If you type your name into Google, it's just a stream of Matt Langridge opening Aldi branches.
Aldi, I know.
It did make me chuckle last night when I did that. I'm only pulling you leg. You don't have to know the answer to that.
No, well, it's good because I don't. Too many to count.
Very good at cutting ribbons. Okay. How are we doing for time?
Amazing how many are going up.
Yeah, I know. That's true. That's true. Are you okay for time? Can we carry on a bit longer? I've got one last section. I can't see anyone who's fallen asleep yet, so let's crack on. But I very deliberately wanted to end where you started, which is to talk a little bit about the beginning of the journey. That's quite deliberate on my part, but I thought it would be a nice way to finish with everybody here who kind of will have, well, lots of people on this call who will have known you right from the start. What was the catalyst for you to turn up at Northwich that day, many moons ago now, and give rowing a try? What was the spark? What was the kind of, how did it happen? Was it a suggestion, a recommendation? For people who don't know that.
Well, it was so I originally got into rowing because of the Olympics. Like I said earlier, so it was watching Steve and Matt win in Atlanta. It kind of gave me the idea. So that was kind of the initial spark. That was kind of what made me suddenly realise that it was a competitive sport. And then actually there's so it was actually down at Moss Farm, and I was down with my friends, and we went to there used to be a gym section. I don't know if you know the old swimming pool. Are they still there? The swimming pool? The
building's still there, but it's now a gymnastics facility. It's been completely ripped out inside.
Okay, they're converted.
Beautiful facility inside. But yeah, I do remember the old gym in there. Yeah.
Yeah, I had a little gym, and there's a rowing machine in there, which I've never seen in the game. But it was obviously like a rowing machine, but it had like a screen on it. and it had you could basically program it, and you had like different settings.
Yeah.
And I've never seen one of these since before or since. And you could basically program in, and you could program in like, I don't know, do you want to be beginner? Do you want to be like intermediate level? And then there was an Olympic setting. So obviously I was a kid, like I thought I'll go for the Olympic setting. And you essentially race, and you race this little, like, it was like these two boats. And obviously, I mean, we must be talking back in '97. So obviously the graphics weren't great. But it was these two little men going, and I smashed it. So I obviously walloped this little boat. And obviously, like, I remember all my friends being like, "Oh my God, you're really good at this. You're really good at this." And obviously, I was secretly like beaming inside, but I tried to play it cool and say, "Oh yeah, I'm sure it's not like." But I think that for me, I was like, "Oh God, I seem quite good at this. I might go and." So maybe that was another little spark that made me think, actually, maybe I could run a go. And then it turned out my sister's friend, was at the rowing club. So I kind of mentioned, I quite fancy giving it a go. And then I think she told me to go down. And then me and another friend went down. And I still remember, like, we walked down the river, and we kind of stood. It was she told us when to go down. I think it was on a Sunday morning. And she said, go down and try and ask for a guy called Mike Polferman.
Yeah.
I'm sure everyone will know. And I remember I was standing at the side for ages, like almost because there was a big crowd of people. And I was like, oh God, and eventually plucked up the courage to go and ask for Mike. And yeah, the rest is history.
Indeed.
They didn't call us back for a couple of months though, but they made us wait for a while. But eventually they gave us the call that we could come down and give it a go. Typically you wait to the winter though. They didn't let us do it in the summer. They waited to the winter.
That's entirely deliberate, I'm sure.
There's someone who fell in quite a lot when they first started. It wasn't the...
Well, the next question was going to be, how long did it take before you kind of realised, I could be pretty handy at this. I'm sure it isn't that day at Moss Farm, but kind of, when you start being coached a little bit. I don't know if it was when you maybe competed for the first few times and it went well, but is there a moment when you think, I could be pretty good at this?
I think we did. So initially I started off on a quad.
Yeah.
And we did so we started off on the quad, and we went to Warrington Head.
Yeah. And
I think there was another junior quad at the time that were doing really well. And we hadn't been rowing very long, and we got closer to them we should have done. And then after that, I think Mike and Kev kind of said, okay, well, maybe we'll start putting you in the single more. And then, initially I did a lot of swimming instead of single. But once I started to stay upright, then I started to kind of progress. And I can't remember which race actually was my first race, but then I think, I just started winning domestically, and then obviously Paul started coaching me, and it kind of went from there, really.
Yeah. I mean, you've talked a lot during your career about the importance of...
Chester was my first one, I think.
Chester, there you go.
Yeah, no, I think I remember now. I kind of, I'd get in front, catch a crab, get behind, get in front, catch a crab, get behind. That was generally...
I was going to say, you've talked a lot about your career, as you go along, about still how important it is to enjoy it and kind of love the sport, whatever your chosen sport might be. Can you remember what it was in those early stages that you really did enjoy about rowing? Was it the racing, the training, the getting to make new friends? I don't know. What were the things that you really enjoyed?
I think for me, it was definitely the racing.
Yeah,
I enjoyed the racing, but it was definitely also the social side. I think it was, I've made some of my best friends that are from the rowing club when I first started. A lot of my best friends are from the rowing club when I first started. I think, it was that kind of, it was a really good group of juniors, and it was just a really enjoyable place to be.
Yeah.
And I just enjoyed being around the club, and I think that for me it made it easier to train hard, because actually I kind of didn't want to go home. I was happy to go out, train. I'd come in, and then there'd be a nice atmosphere in the bar, and obviously not me because I was too young. But then I was happily, like, I'd hang around. Then we'd go out for another session, and it was kind of, it wasn't like I was in a rush to get out there. So And then obviously the more I trained, the better I got, and then the better I got, the more I enjoyed it. But I think actually, yeah, it was the fact that it was such a nice, friendly place to be, and yeah, I kind of enjoyed that being there. But I think I mean, to talk about the enjoyment, that's definitely how I started.
Yeah.
But actually, it's something that I also had to remember in my career. I mean, I remember after London. London for me was probably the most disappointing point in my career. Build up to London, really thought we could win. I've been the world champion twice in the build up to London. It was home games. It was kind of like one opportunity to win in front of home games, and I kind of obviously didn't go the way I wanted to. We got the bronze and didn't get the gold, and for me that was really personally disappointing. It probably took me quite a long time to actually get over.
Okay.
And actually, one of the things that helped me get over it, and one of the things I realised was actually I was almost pinning 4 years. The way I was kind of viewing it was actually that I almost saw that 4 years as wasted because I hadn't got the results I wanted to.
Okay.
But actually, I realised after through time that actually that 4 years hadn't been wasted. I had a lot of great experiences, and I'd been world champion, I'd improved, and I kind of suddenly realised that actually, if I was going to go for another games, I needed to make sure I enjoyed the journey.
Sure.
Because I think I'd definitely lost that. I'd enjoyed that enjoyment of the sport. I'd been so focused on the end result that was the most important thing. And if I didn't get that end result, then actually that 4 years was wasted. And I thought, well, actually, that's too much of your life to pin on one result. You've got to enjoy the journey. You've got to enjoy all the experiences along the way. And that's kind of that was kind of my approach in the build to Rio. And I definitely felt that even though that my build up to Rio probably wasn't as successful. I mean, I got some silver medals, but I didn't get a gold medal build up to Rio. But I enjoyed that so much more. I allowed myself to enjoy it so much more again, and just enjoy the general camaraderie of being with the guys and the team, and not always be so focused and obsessed with the end result. Because I think that is also important. That's definitely why I got into it in the first place.
Well, that preempts my next question. That's particularly important as a junior, isn't it? There'll be juniors on the call today. And that's a really strong message to them, isn't it? To kind of enjoy the process, enjoy being part of an amazing sport, enjoy doing it and training with your friends. I mean, I asked you earlier when you were in the kind of elite and professional world how important winning was. Maybe your answer to that is the flip when it comes to being a junior. There's nothing wrong with aspiring to win, by the way, but obviously kind of savouring that enjoyment of the sport you've chosen to do is really important kind of when you're learning the ropes, isn't it?
Yeah, I think definitely. I think in some ways, a happy athlete is a more successful athlete.
Sure.
And I think that sometimes the perception is that in order to win and be successful, you almost can't enjoy it. You've got to take everything so seriously and be so committed and do everything so well that actually you can't enjoy it. Whereas actually, I think for me, when I stepped back and said, actually, you know what, I'm going to just enjoy this. I'm not going to be everything's all about the result and winning. I actually started doing better. And I think that's kind of I think sometimes definitely with the way sports are going, and we always talk about these marginal gains, and you can get so fixated on all the little things, whereas actually the main thing is just enjoying being there, enjoying doing the sport. Definitely. I think for me, that definitely helped. It kind of made me more relaxed. I was a lot more relaxed than going into Rio because yes, of course I wanted to win, but I'd enjoyed my time to get there.
Yeah.
So it took a bit of pressure off. It wasn't like everything pinned on this one result. I've actually enjoyed the build up to it. Okay. And I think definitely for me, the rowing club is a really enjoyable place to be, and that's what kind of got me into the sport and got me the first success. Because in some ways, because I enjoyed it so much, training was easy. It was. I wanted to be there, and because I was there, I trained hard, trained longer, and then I got better, and then it's just kind of I enjoyed it more, and then it's just kind of but it ultimately stemmed from that enjoying being down there, enjoying just being with the guys and being with my friends.
Okay. Lily has asked, where was your favourite place to compete at when you were representing Northwich? Did you have a favourite event or venue?
So my favourite venue was actually weirdly Home Pierpoint.
Yeah.
Okay. So if we're talking about favourite place to race seriously, it was Home Pierpoint. I mean, I still remember. I think it's just the excitement of. I still remember the first time going there, and you drive over that kind of lump and you see this massive 2,000 meter lake in front of you.
Yeah.
And I think that even when I go back now, that still hasn't gone. I still get that same feeling, that same kind of nervous energy of that I got as a junior. So I think and obviously that's where we had the national championships the first time. And I think, for me, it's kind of, I still love, I mean, I know a lot of the guys don't like it. A lot of the guys in the team used to hate it when we had to go to home pier point. But for me, it was kind of, I think it kind of brought back good memories. I think in terms of actually fun weekend, that one of my favourite weekends was always Gloucester Bristol Ross. Probably wasn't as serious as going to home pier point, but it was always the weekend. One of the weekends I look forward to the most. I mean, again, that was just enjoying being with your mates, enjoying some racing, but actually just enjoying being with your mates, and it was just a fun weekend to be.
On a similar tip, and thanks Liv for putting this in the chat. What about memories of Northwich Regatta?
Yeah, I think I mean, obviously the regatta's changed a bit since I was there. So when I used to race, it was on the old field by the Blue Bridge.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that I didn't actually get to race it that much because it used to clash with national schools.
Yeah.
I think I used to race national schools, and I might get back for the Monday. So there was only the first year that I actually got to do the full weekend. But yeah, I think I might be right in thinking that Northwich is my first place I won. I should know, but I think Chester's my first regatta, but I think Northwich might have been the first place I won. So, but then I think I've raced in the new place once. I think I remember coming back and actually doing a singles race, and actually that was one of the most nervous races, because obviously at that point I was doing international stuff and I'd been winning a lot, and suddenly you're at Northwich Regatta and you just can't lose. You don't really have anything to win. You just can't lose.
Definitely. I haven't asked you about this yet, and I think it's really important that I do, and I've left this to the section of when we're talking about still your junior career. Obviously, I mentioned right at the outset of the intro about you becoming the first British rower to win men's single score goals at the World Junior Championships. Now, you've said this to me before, but I've also read you talk about it in other interviews where, in many ways, you actually rank that as the kind of finest achievement in your career. And people kind of looking in from the outside might say that's an odd thing to say, given that you've won in an Olympic final. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and why you've said that previously, and kind of the experience of that moment? Because I think, we've talked about that you've been an Olympian today, but obviously we're talking in this section about your formative years and what a moment that was for you, and how I may have, of course, was springboard for things that went on earlier. But I'm interested to hear you talk a little bit about that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I think. I mean, it's hard to say that it would probably rank as my highest, because most people just won't believe it, because obviously I did the Olympics.
Oh.
But I think for me the difference is that by the time you get into the Olympic team, there's so much of it is out of that. It's great. You're part of this big team. But you've got so much support staff, coaching. You almost become a cog in the team. Yes, you're the guy going out there and performing, or one of the guys going out there performing, but you're part of this greater team around you. Whereas I think when I won the juniors, it was just me and Paul. I'd gone to the Junior World Championships the year before, and I'd basically I'd come fourth in the double.
Yeah.
And I was bitterly disappointed. I was only 17, so I had another year to do, and I basically came back and I was really disappointed, and I said, right, okay, if I'm going to go back and do the juniors again, I'm going to go back in the single, I'm going to make sure I win. And at the time, no Brit had ever done that, so I think everyone was like, okay, it's quite an ambitious target. But we kind of sat down and, obviously, as Paul's on the call, I don't want to misspeak. But my memory is we kind of sat down and said, okay, let's do it. And it was just us. We had this goal, this ambition, and we kind of set about how we're going to make this work. And I think that for me was because I was so much part of the process. It was kind of just the two of us with this kind of ambition, this goal. that for me was when I achieved it, when we achieved it. It was like the greatest feeling, because it said it was our goal, my goal that I'd done and set myself. And whereas I think with the Olympics, it's a different feeling because you are part of this bigger team and
Sure.
you're part of this bigger wheel. Whereas I said, I think it was with the juniors, it was kind of, we had a boat, we had a club, and okay, off you go make it happen.
Yeah.
And also, not a lot of people backed it. I remember the chief coach at the time, even though he swears blind that he didn't, but I remember him sitting me down in Seville in December and saying, I don't think you'd be good enough.
Right.
So I had to prove him wrong. Obviously, when I did, he suddenly
changed his tune. Yeah,
he changed his tune. But that's the thing. It was an ambitious target, but we had that real kind of goal and kind of to do, and to kind of then go out and do it was it's kind of, for me, was a really proud moment.
Just a couple of things from me before I finish, and then I can open the floor to other people if they did want to ask anything, because I'm conscious of time. But one of the things you've agreed to do recently is become an ambassador for Northwich Youth Rowing, which, if people don't know what that is, it's a new initiative that was launched late last year, designed to introduce school children to the sport that previously probably wouldn't have had an opportunity to try it. Now, obviously, I've asked you during this section about kind of your experience of kind of getting into rowing, and I think it's fair to say when you and I were at school, being signposted to go and try rowing just wasn't something that was on the radar of PE departments, and that isn't a criticism of our teachers, by the way, but it wasn't something that we were kind of encouraged to even consider. So why do you think then, you obviously agreed to become an ambassador for this, why do you think it's important that we kind of have initiatives like this that that enable people, just even if it's just to give rowing a try? It's a difficult sport maybe to recruit people into because it's not done at lots of schools. So having something like this could be really key to kind of unlocking potential that we don't know is out there. But even on a more basic level, just giving people an opportunity to try this sport that's given you so much satisfaction and joy over the years is quite exciting in itself, to kind of see other people get joy from rowing, hopefully.
I mean, I think for me, it's all about opportunity. I mean, I was really fortunate that obviously with rowing particularly, that rowing was only 5 minutes from my house, so it meant my parents didn't have to drive me anywhere. But equally, if it'd been half an hour from my house, they still would have driven me. So I had this opportunity to go and try the sport. But I think obviously it's a lot more difficult, and for some people, and it's a great opportunity to just let people try rowing. And it's not necessarily about finding the next Olympic champions, which, okay, if we can do them, brilliant. I'll happily give up my crown. But I think it just, as I said, I think sport in general can kind of teach you so much, and it's about kind of teamwork, and I think it's just about giving people the opportunity. I mean, I'm a big believer that the great thing about sport is there's a sport out there for everybody. It doesn't matter your shape, your size, your mentality, whatever it is. There's such a variety of sports. There is a sport out there for everybody. It's just, unfortunately, a lot of people don't get to find that sport. So I think the more we can give people the opportunity to come down and try it, then I think that's just a good thing. And I think, if you can encourage more people to give it a go, and it might not be for everyone, but it doesn't have to necessarily be the fact that you're going to excel in it. It's just, if you can enjoy it and you can be part of it, and kind of, I think that, there is so many lessons that sports teaches you. I think it's such a good thing.
Definitely, and brilliant that a club like Northwich is involved in something like that. And this is the very last thing from me now. I mean, again, we've talked often over the years. You've never kind of forgotten where it started. You've talked often to me and to others in interviews about kind of recognising the place that your time at Northwich has had in what you've then gone on to achieve. And kind of, we saw that when you came back for the parade after Rio, and people had turned out, and kind of the pride that people felt locally about someone from Northwich going on to achieve what you did. But that's been something that's important to you, isn't it? That recognising where it did start, and it's great when I read other athletes say this as well, kind of acknowledging whether it was their first coach, their first club, their first kind of experience of the sport, has always been something that you've championed and that you've kind of felt quite strongly about, isn't it?
Yeah, I think I mean, I think for me, obviously, I may only speak from my experience, but obviously for me, I always feel very privileged to have come from such a supportive club that have just supported me along the way. I mean, I know obviously now, like my later years, I rode for Leander, but actually, I mean, that was actually encouraged by the members of the club. They said, "Look, we've taken you as far as we can, and now we're happy. We'll always support you." And actually, that for me was such a strong message that actually we're just here to support you, get you where to fulfil your potential.
Yeah.
And actually, I'd probably say, going back to Rio, one of the most emotional moments for me was, and I'm not normally that emotional, people who know me, but was actually, I think there's things Rachel Hooper sent me a video, there's a video clip of everybody watching my race at Northwich.
Yeah.
And for me, I mean, it was incredible. That for me was really emotional, because it's kind of watching the people that have supported me to get there, and all the times and all the ups and downs, and have always been there and supported me and stood by me, to see what I'd given them, and how much it meant to them. For me, was definitely kind of probably one of the most emotional things in terms of I think it is. I think that for me was it's got kind of to see what it meant to everybody else actually was also such a big deal.
Definitely. And you know, others that have come behind you that have gone on to be part of the international setup, certainly at junior level. Northwich is very much on the rowing map, and that's something as well to be immensely proud of. You've played a part in that, and then others have reinforced that reputation, haven't they?
Yeah, I think. I mean, I wouldn't like to say I started, because I didn't. I mean, there was juniors who'd done well before me, but I think if I can say I was part of it, then yeah, I mean, that's great. I think a lot of it is just it's just inspired, showing people what you're capable of doing. I think it's not necessarily. I mean, I think it's about kind of saying, okay, well, like when I started, I didn't know where I could take it, and I was able to do it, and there's nothing I don't see particularly kind of different about me. So obviously, if I can do it, then you can do it as well. And I think hopefully, I mean, I can see obviously that kind of as a club how it's just going from strength to strength, and I take a lot of enjoyment in watching how successful the juniors were, and how well they're doing. I think I think one of the great things is there's so many people who just give up their own free time just for the love of the sport and the love of the club. I think it's really kind of like I said, I've always felt privileged to come from a club like that, and it's definitely got me to where I got to.
I think that's a really nice place for me to finish. I'm just going to have a quick look at the chat now. We have had one submitted question. This is other people's last chance to scribble something in there if you want to. But Joe has asked, why is your boat called Jack Flash?
So the reason it was called Jack Flash was so the first boat I rode in was a burger show. It was an Northwich burger show called Flash, and then Jack was my granddad.
Okay.
My granddad basically gave me the money to buy the new boat, so it was kind of an honour of him.
There you go. That's the only question I think that's in there. All I would say is thanks so much for being so generous with your time. I've really enjoyed catching up with you. I'm not sure if we've covered everything people wanted to hear about, but we've given it a good stab in 90 minutes to cover as much as possible. Last minute question from Beth. Let me just have a look. This is quite a good question. Okay. When you have a race plan and you've trained as well as you can all the way up to the race, and everything feels like it's going according to that plan, if it doesn't, what would you look at to change straight away? It's kind of a last minute spanner in the works.
So if we're talking about in the race, I think this is why I think, I mean, for me, a race plan is always just a broad outline. You have an idea of the way you want to race, but I've never been a fan of being really scripted. In some ways, this is one of the things. So this is one of the things I actually struggled with in the 8. Obviously, having a Coxes like to have a scripted race plan, and so we actually had the night before the final, we had a very strong heated debate because what happened in the heat was we had a really good start, 1,000 meters was going really well, and then Phelan made this call of it was a legs call, basically trying to get us put a bit more effort down, but at that point we were in a really good rhythm, and all it did was kind of knock us out of our rhythm. And it didn't mean we didn't slow down, but we were moving away, and it stopped us moving away, and it meant that it was detrimental. We still won the heat comfortably, but we kind of said, okay, we can't do the same in the final. So what we kind of put across is, look, if we're going really well and the boat's moving well, sometimes the best thing is to do nothing. You have to have the confidence. Actually, you might have had a call at that point that you'd planned, but if you don't need it, you have to have the confidence not to say it. And obviously, Phelan, being a Cox, he likes to have things to say, wasn't too happy about it, but we eventually managed to get him to realise that you've got to do what's best for the crew. And sure enough, same thing happened. Really good first 1,000. We're moving away, and we got to 1,000 meters, and yeah, this time total silence. Just said nothing. He left the call. He waited for the call to kind of be a bit further down the line, and then eventually, and then when we needed it, he called it. So it's a bit hard to say what I'd immediately change, because obviously you've got to change what's relevant at the time. But you've also got to go in with the mindset that you've got, okay, you might have a plan, but you can't be fixated on it. You've got to race the race that's in front of you. And you've got to feel, for me, it's always been about feeling about how my boat's going. Sometimes it's easy to get fixated on the people, but it's about doing what's best for your boat. And if your boat's going well and somebody's going faster, well, sometimes you have to accept that. And you've got to trust that they're using too much energy, or they come back to you or whatever. But if it's your boat that's not going well and you need to change something, then you've got to call it. You've got to make the change then and there to change what's going on in your boat. But you do have to, in terms of race plan, you kind of got to race the race that's in front of you.
Does
that answers the question?
Yeah,
Beth?
does that answer the question, Beth? Thumbs up or come in.
Sorry, yeah, it definitely does. I was always to think like, if you come back from a race, like you're on your way home, or in your car, and you're thinking like, oh, that didn't go the way.
Oh, you mean after?
Yeah, and it's like
okay.
In the race as well, definitely, because we've had a few issues like that before, where like you say, the Cox calls something and then it actually affects it negatively. So I've had a few times where like you're on the way home, you're thinking like, okay, everything's done well, like your nutrition's fine and sleeping fine, training's going really well, PBs everywhere, and you're like, but I didn't win. And like I'm trying to think like, what do I need to change? Is it crew attitude? Is it training? Is it like food? And it's like I always used to think like, what is that one thing to look at first?
Okay, 2 seconds. I just got to plug my laptop in as well. I'm back. Oh, back is. Okay, it looks like we're good. So I mean, I think so. What we used to do is we'd have first of all, we'd usually have a debrief just after the race. But equally, you've got to appreciate sometimes the debrief is, if it's straight after the race, there's still a lot of emotions going on. So what we generally do is say, okay, we have a quick debrief, get everybody's ideas, and then we say, right, okay, let's forget it for now. We'll go away, go home, forget about it, and we'll come back the next day or whenever we go back to training, and then we'll sit down and we'll have a proper meeting, and then it's kind of breaking it down point by point. And generally, if it's an 8, it's a long meeting because there's a lot more people. It takes a lot longer. I mean, in the 8s, we've had some really lengthy 2-hour discussions because everybody wants to get that point. But it's important to kind of break it down, and then by the end of it, just to really come down to 1 or 2 points that you're going to focus on. So we had it after. Brandenburg in the Rio year. We'd been going really well, but we'd been flying. We got to Brandenburg, and then finally we just got really bad conditions. It was like it was a bad crosswind, lanes were unfair, and we were in the middle of the lane, and we just got really bad conditions. And we kind of looked, and it'd been going really well at that point. But we kind of sat down and said, okay, what are the things that we can do well, and what's within our control, and what's not within our control. And I think that's one of the things that sometimes you've got to identify, that what is it within your control and what's not within your control. For us, the conditions are completely out of our control, so it's almost may as well park it. The fact the lanes haven't been hadn't been reseeded was out of our control. So again, there's no point talking about it. But what we could affect was, okay, first of all, we looked at the boat and we said, okay, if we have those conditions again, maybe the boat is not the best set up. But so we decided that's Jurgen's responsibility. So, okay, we won't worry about that. We'll let Jurgen worry about that. But then we looked at, okay, what can we do? We kind of identified a thing technically, but also we identified mentally that rather than shying away from those conditions, what we needed to do was actually see those conditions every time as a opportunity to go out there and practice. And it kind of really it showed that when we got to Rio, because we got to Rio and it was like 3 days before the final. 3 days before the start of the Olympics, and the weather was awful. I mean, we turned up and the lake it was like the North Sea. Nobody else was going out in the water. But for us, we just said, right, okay, brilliant. This is our opportunity to go and practice, because this might be what the conditions we get when we race. Let's go and practice. So we went out, and I mean, it was ridiculous because we were pretty much sinking. But for us, it was that resolve of, okay, look, this is our opportunity to make sure that if we get these conditions in the final, then we're best prepared. So I think a lot of it is kind of just identifying 1-2 points. But then also sometimes you just have to also hold your hands up and say that sometimes the opposition have raced better, and there isn't always a very clear cut, okay, this is what we've done wrong. It's just sometimes they're doing whatever they're doing better, and it's kind of working out how you can, whatever it is, you can kind of raise your game. I mean, that certainly was the case in London. That if I look at London, definitely we made a lot of mistakes in the build up to London. But actually, the race itself was the best race we could put together. And actually, we put the Germans under as much pressure as we could do, and they raced better. They basically held their nerve, and they were the better crew on the day. And it's hard to admit. We don't like, but yeah, it's kind of the best we could do on that day. And in some ways, that for me was easy to take the Beijing, because actually on that day, there was no I couldn't have done anything differently. In Beijing, we didn't race as well, and you go away and think, oh God, if I'd done race this differently or that differently, it could have done better. But I think sometimes, yeah, it's just kind of, it's maybe just focus on 1-2 things, but not it. It's not always that you've done something wrong. Sometimes it's just they're quicker, and you've got to find a way of kind of, and it's chipping away. I don't know if that helps or not.
Graham, do you want to come in to wrap it up? Do you want to say something?
Yes, if I may, please. Yeah, Andrew, I must have a little confession as well. I did have a number of questions from Matt's mates that you mentioned earlier. But I think they omitted, or didn't read the bit that it was rowing related. So we'll be very pleased to know that I'm not forwarded them to you.
Yeah, I'm sure. I am, and I'm sure he is as well.
Yeah, you'll get them with a private message. Listen,
I'm also glad you haven't asked me as well.
My time will come. Listen, we're at an hour and 3/4, and I'm sat here mesmerised and completely inspired by the questions and the answers, which I hope everybody else is. It's wonderful. It's flown by. Thank you to all the members who've joined in. I'm on an iPhone there, so I can see 4 people, well, including myself, so 3 and 3 others, me and my 3 others. So I hope you found it interesting. And more importantly, inspiring. It's tough times at the minute, and we all need a bit of a lift, and that certainly given me one, Matt and Andrew. So on behalf of the club, Andrew, thank you so much for agreeing to do this.
Pleasure.
Your relationship with Matt is clear to see, and to cover him, to be perhaps in a local paper and have the privilege of an Olympic triple medalist and a champion at the end of it, must have been fantastic for you to report on. And you've been a great reporter, very, very good to rowing in the town at the Grange and at Northwich. So we're grateful for that. And I will finish up just by thanking you, Matt. You know, we go back a long way with a lot of people, and I have very fond memories, as you know. And I just think to do what you've done, you're going into a new chapter now, and it will be tricky for a little bit, but it'll sort itself out. We know that, it always will. Time will sort everything. But I'm just very grateful for you for doing this, for the club for zooming in, And maybe it's something we can look at doing again with one or two of these others who are aspiring, because Beth's in my little quadrant here. So I can see her just looking away there as well. But just before we do go, I've noticed that Carolyn was in my little quadrant as well. And she's had a drink every time she stood up. So points comes back with a glass full each time. Anyway, where it is. Take care, everybody. Thank you so much. And we'll see you before too long.
Thanks,
Cheers.
everybody. Good to see lots of familiar faces. Thank you.
Well, thanks everyone. Thanks for listening. And yeah, I just wish everyone the best for this year and whatever racing, if any, you get to do. But yeah, I think the main thing is enjoy it and enjoy being on the club. And I think whatever it ends up being, it will be a great year.